This is Revolutionary Radio, and I'm Gillie Priest. Today I want to develop a reasoning within a particular context in order to highlight the reasoning from a certain perspective. The aspect I really want to come from is how did millions of Africans ended up in the Western Hemisphere, captured and sold into bondage of such a gigantic proportion this world has never been witness to before. Now there are many different angles one may approach this question. How did we end up in the Western world in bondage? There are some perspectives, whether right or wrong, that we were captured by Europeans and sold to Europeans into bondage. In others' perspective, there are those who are of the opinion and the knowledge that the Arabs, the Muslims, were the first ones that sold us into bondage to the Europeans. There's another aspect to it where tribes were selling their other tribes into bondage through the process of warfare. That means two tribes or two nations went to war. The enemy soldiers were captured, and instead of killing them, they were sold into bondage. But in some aspect, no matter in which way we were captured, the aspect of selling us into slavery was a fundamental aspect and perspective of the slavery we have to endure for more than 400 years. So whether through warfare, whether through trade, whatever the reason was, some of our own leaders, some of our own Africans sold us into bondage. That's one of the reality we cannot deny. There makes no difference of the nuance that apply to that situation. We were sold into bondage. Then we came and we spent over 400 years in bondage. And because of the fact that we were sold into bondage, we have grown very, very suspicious of leadership. Because we have always been able to go back to the fact and reality that for the vast majority of our people, our history has shown us that our people sold us into bondage, and our people will sell us into bondage again if necessary. So over the centuries we have grown suspicious of leadership. And because of the fact that we have grown suspicious to leadership, we have developed a psychological resistance to fostering leadership amongst ourselves. Okay. So here we fast forward into 2024. And while I was in the United States, sometimes I read the paper or I watch the international news, and I see where the Jamaican government is still sending Jamaica to foreign countries for trial and imprisonment under another name which they call extradition. There is no difference between the term of extradition and selling us into slavery. It comes from the same psychological depth. Our leaders has always consistently, for whatever the reason, this guy is under any international law, they will package us and put us on the modern day slave ship, which they call the aeroplane, and send our people into bondage. Now look. Do you believe that the United States would ever, under any circumstances, send one of its citizens to be tried and imprisoned in any country in the Caribbean? Look at Israel. A person of Jewish practice can commit a crime anywhere in the world and run to Israel. And no matter what, whether it's America, England, Germany, Israel will never ever turn over its citizen to be tried and imprisoned in a foreign country. Now, why Israel has that position and Jamaica not that position? Israel and the Israeli are seeing themselves as a people who has been persecuted historically for centuries. We're not going to get into whether they are the real Jew or they're not the real Jew, or what they do or what you may think. That is not the reason of this conversation. We're talking about countries that will never ever turn over their citizens to be tried and imprisoned in a foreign country. None of those European countries would ever turn over their citizens to be tried in the Jamaica judicial system. So why do we do that to our citizens? Why do we chain up whole families and put them on plane and send them to a foreign country where this very government has refused to assist its government in foreign countries? What is so imbecile about our government and leadership that they do not recognize that these action of theirs of selling us out as psychologically damaged and wounded us historically, and they continue to do it day after day after day? How can you turn over your citizens to a foreign country that you know that would never ever turn over their citizens to you? What explanation does the government of Jamaica have for that? They say, oh, well, there's a very high levels of crime associated with the what they call it is a fraudulent term, but it's dealing with the guys that they refer to themselves as choppers. Oh, these choppers are committing crime, so we are going to send them to foreign country because the United States says a part of the action that they committed is taking place in their country, so they have to transfer them to a foreign country. Do you know how that looks outside of Jamaica? To see the Jamaican government putting Jamaicans in chains to send to a foreign country that you know in those countries black people get no sense of justice, no sense of fairness, no adequate representation in court. Are you selling hundreds of our citizens to foreign country for trials? To any well-meaning, consciously developed nation, they will never have any form of respect for you and yours, because you have shown no form of respect for yourself, or neither for you nor your own. I remember when I was incarcerated in the United States, we communicated with the Jamaican government, with various government, JLP government and PMP government, and we plead for assistance in various ways. And you know what similarity between all the responses we get? There is nothing the Jamaican government can do. The Jamaican government cannot intervene within the judicial affairs of the United States. The very citizens that you are chaining and sending into slavery, because do not question whether or not I'm using the term slavery appropriately. Go and read the United States Constitution, the 13th Amendment. You want me to tell you what the 13th Amendment says? Slavery is legal in the United States as long as you have been constitutionally convicted. There is not a prisoner in the United States who is not in legal slavery. Go and get your international expert to interpret the United States 13th Amendment for you. So don't sit here and try to propagate this effect about criminality. You are literally selling your citizens into slavery into the United States based upon the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Now you may ask, where does the selling come from? Do you believe you're doing this without some type of financial compensation from the United States? Let me say something to the Jamaican people. The Jamaican budget does not cover the cost of running the Jamaican government within any 12-month period. The United States and Europe contribute millions of dollars, a vast percentage of the dollars that covers the cost for maintaining the Jamaican government any year. And because they are the one that supports the Jamaican budget, you have to bow to the almighty dollar. And that is the reason why when the United States or any European country say, send us your citizens for imprisonment, you have to send them. So don't tell me about this is not selling people in slavery. If there is any financial compensation, and in alliance with the financial compensation, the 13th Amendment of the United States says slavery is still legal in the United States as long as you are convicted. Then you cannot tell me you are not sending your citizens into slavery. That is a disgrace. No self-respecting nation, no nation with any backbone and rectitude, spine, would ever turn over this. If a person in Jamaica commit a crime, you can try them in Jamaica. You can imprison them in Jamaica. You can seek and render justice in Jamaica if that's what you seek. But to change, I've seen videotapes with women, children, fathers, uncle, chain and one string of chain leading them to the American modern day slave ship, the aeroplane. And it hurts me to my core knowing that the same thing that we and our ancestors experienced from the 15th century, our so-called independent government in 2024 is still selling us into bondage. Yeah. When are we going to get up? When are we going to stand up? When are we going to fight for our rights? The other day someone said to me, priest, be cautious. Be cautious. And I said, you know what? Your advice is well taken. And your advice is well heeded. But let me tell you something. The truth must be spoken. Heroes must be pointed out, regardless of the cost, regardless of the trials, regardless of the tribulation. This government has no right to sell its citizens for any little pottage all over the world. Hundreds, if not thousands, of our citizens have been betrayed by this government. Sometimes I look around the parliament and I see them pontificating. The vast majority of them does not even look like us. The vast majority of them has never shared our experience. The vast majority of them has no original concept and ideas to how to move people forward. But there is one thing the Jamaican government is experiencing. It knows to sell us into bondage. It knows perfectly how to chain us. It knows how to cut deals behind our back. It knows how to exploit us. It knows how to oppress us. And yet they all want you to look around and see buildings and roads and say we are making progress. Let me tell you something. There is no progress outside our living experience of what has been bequeathed to us by our ancestors and our own intelligence. If you know, and it is your position, through diplomatic rules and regulation, that you cannot assist your citizens when they are being tried and imprisoned in the United States, Why are you chaining them and sending them to a foreign country? How can you boast that you have a judicial system that bequeaths justice to its citizens, yet you have to bow to the wishes to export your children? What mother exports its kids? What mother puts more faith in a foreign judicial system than within their own? I personally was tried and convicted in the United States. Not only was I innocent of the crimes, but I was tried and convicted as a person who I am not. And this was verified by Interpol. This was verified by the Jamaican government. This was verified from the Jamaica Constabulary Force. And yet, your position was that you cannot do anything. Why are you exporting your citizens when it is your position that you are unable to do anything for them when they leave this country? You know what else was a big disgrace? I was returned to this country on June 30th. And we were chained and shackled and put on a plane bound for Jamaica. And when that plane flew, whether in or around the Cuban airspace, but once it exited the United States airspace, they still kept the chains on us. When we were no longer within the rules bound by the United States. When we landed in Jamaica, we landed in Jamaica chained and shackled. You think that's what the United States does when its citizens are returned? First of all, you couldn't even be disrespectful enough to return a United States citizen chained and shackled. That's a disgrace. That is a disgrace. Stop selling your citizens for a bowl of pottage. Stop selling your citizens for a bowl of pottage. These grievances that we have, you get a clear vision of them when you are in a foreign country and you look back. You see the enormous racism that Jamaicans suffer in foreign country, and then you see tourists come to this country because of a Yankee dollar, and people have to worship them like God. You yourself, government, you fix up every tourist area. You make sure that the very ground that the white man walks on is perfectly flat. But the roads that the people have to traverse on a daily basis is rocky road. A rocky road literally and a rocky road physically. That is how you make our bed for us. When you look at any self-respecting nation, the vision of the world they have traverses through their experience, especially their experience with other people. And I like to use those who practice modern day Judaism to say how they deal with the world. They have been a people who has been oppressed throughout Europe for centuries. And therefore the policies that they implement are policies that they learn from that experience. They do not turn over their citizens because they know that the people of their heritage that practice Judaism will not, never, ever get equal justice in any country upon the face of the earth. That is how they interpret their history, and that is from which they set their policy. But if you look at us as a people in the Caribbean and in Africa, none of the laws, rules and regulations and acts and articles that bound our everyday action, none of them derives from our historical experience. It is like the laws that govern us is divorced from our own experience. We have adopted willy-nilly all rules, regulations, articles from foreign countries as if we are not a people with any experience that should generate that which governs us from within ourselves. You know, and to give another example of this, look at the general penitentiary. That is something that has been irking me for years while I was in prison. Look at the general penitentiary, the main prison in Jamaica. How many people know that the general penitentiary in this our period of slavery was the biggest slave market in the Caribbean? How many people knew that? How many people, when they walk by the general penitentiary every day, some of the places you could still see the chains in the wall, know that our ancestors was shackled and chained and sold in that very building, and you turn around and use that building to imprison us? Which nation on the face of this earth would take such a building, such a monumental historical building, and imprisoned the progenitors of those who were sold in that very... You're such a self-disrespecting people. It irks me. You think Israel would do that? You think any white nation would do that? Do you think any self-respecting nation would imprison the descendants of those who were bound, shackled, chained, and sold in that very building? And then recently there has been conversation about selling the building for housing development. Let me say something. If there is any reason for this nation to rise up, that is a reason right there. If there is any reason for this nation to rise up, selling our citizens into bondage to the European country is sufficient enough. And I say all these things without any apology. Any apology. Any apology. You are nothing but a criminal class calling yourself rulers. Yeah, a criminal class calling yourself rulers. You are the most self-disrespecting leadership maybe upon the face of the earth. Yeah, that is what it is. And these things has to be pointed out. Any other nation would have turned that building into such a monumental memory to the nation and its people. Any other self-respecting nation would have allowed the country to make pilgrimage to such a spot. And what do? You imprison people there. You imprison people in such a monumental place in our history. See, I see in this country where there are museums to different ethnic groups that have suffered less tribulation than us, and they have, this government and private sectors have erected monuments for memories to the descendants of those who had suffered there. But we, the Africans, we get lost in the sauce. We get lost in the sauce. Nothing to remind us. They tend to bury us under the Jamaican memory. They tend to bury us under, quote unquote, the Jamaican monuments. This out of many one people. It is one of the most slimiest motto I have ever heard that was brought into existence. Out of many, we are one. Out of which many, we are which one? We are one in what? What are we one in? This is nothing new. This is nothing new. We have this jingoistic nationalism that has been imposed upon the people. You give us a flag and you give us a song, and we put the rest together. You know? So stop selling us to foreign country. And if you cannot, if any one member of parliament cannot stand up and make a comment and denounce this practice, then that will exemplify to the Jamaican people how correct my position is. Let a member of parliament stand up and explain satisfactorily to the Jamaican people why you have to chain and bound and ship your citizen to a country that would never do it to yours. That is what we have to delve into. And all these different issues are connected. They are all interconnected. Selling us into bondage, using a monumental place like the General Penitentiary where our ancestors were sold into slavery, and imprisoning their descendants. See? Miseducating us. Creating this great confusion within the consciousness of the people, that they confuse development with growth. Growth and development are two different things. People see growth and believe growth is development. Growth is not development. And that's another topic I'm going to highlight at another time, because it goes to the psyche of our people. There are prisoners in the United States, individual prisoners. Now, I'm not speaking of collectively. There are individual prisoners who want to return home. There's a thing that they call the Prison Transfer Treaty. And the Prison Transfer Treaty, that is signed by many countries in the world, including the United States, allows individual citizens to return to the country of their birth to complete their sentence. The government has the right under this treaty to refuse or accept any individual that applies for this privilege. Jamaica is one of the only countries in the world that refused to sign the Prison Transfer Treaty. And let me give you an example with Trinidad. Trinidad had also for years refused to sign this treaty. And there was a government minister in Trinidad, I don't recall if it was the Attorney General, one of the high government officials. His son got arrested in Florida for selling drugs and got sentenced to a heavy term of imprisonment. And you know what happened within months after that happened? Trinidad signed the Prison Transfer Treaty, just so the minister's son could seek to return to Trinidad. That is what we do in the Caribbean. We cater to the individual family, not to the nation. We turn to Jamaica. For decades in the United States, we asked the Jamaican government to sign a prison transfer treaty so that those individuals, because it is not like as if the government sign it, everybody is going to try to. The majority of Jamaicans is not trying to come to Jamaica to do no imprisonment. But for the individuals who caters to that wish, we have asked the Jamaican government, and for decades upon decades upon decades, they have refused to acquiesce to those wishes. You know what they wrote and told us? I think it came from Minister K.D. Knight. They said Jamaica has no space. So here the Jamaican government is telling us they have no space to bring home 1 man or 2 men or 3 men. But they have space every day to arrest and imprison their citizens for minor crimes, for marijuana, for minor verbal language use in the public sphere. These are the minor things that they find space for. But the very citizens that they export into bondage and slavery, they makes no accommodation for them on an individual basis to return home. It is not like if they sign the treaty, a person can enter the country without their approval. They can still deny that citizen the right to return if they sign the treaty. So why is it Jamaica won't sign the treaty? Why is it you refuse to allow your citizen to return home? Why is it in this country you can export us into bondage to be tried and sentenced for crime where citizens are given 25 years, 50 years, 100 years, natural life? And when foreigners commit the same crime in this country, you find them $100 Jamaican and send them home. Where is your legitimacy? Where is your self-respect? Where is your respect for the Jamaican people, knowing that they could see through this silhouette of deceit and fraud that you have been committing since 1962? How long do you believe this deceit and fraud is going to last? How long you think you are going to keep getting over? How long? We'll tell you what, we are demanding an answer. And we are demanding that a member of parliament with any degree of consciousness to stand up and ask some of these questions of his own parliamentarians, beginning with the most fundamental one. When is the government of Jamaica going to stop selling its citizens into bondage? I have pointed out why I can legitimately use the term selling. These policies are based upon the fact that the Jamaican government receive funds to sustain the government on a yearly budgetary basis. And on the slavery aspect, every citizen from Jamaica that you sell to the slaveholders in America, once they are tried and convicted, they comes up under the United States 13th Amendment of their Constitution. Every citizen who is tried and convicted and sentenced in the United States is bound to the act of slavery. Get your constitutional scholars. They can explain that better to you than I can. So you have no justification in doing that. You have no justification in following in the footsteps of those leaders that sold us into slavery. You have no excuse. You can no longer hide behind lack of knowledge. You can no longer hide behind a lack of consciousness. What you are lacking is a sense of racial pride. What you are lacking is a true sense of nationalism that any self-respecting leader or government would have if they really love their people. So that's a challenge that's been sent down to you. That is the challenge of the day right here that I'm putting out. Stop. The excuse you are using, one of the excuses you are using is that these so-called choppers, these choppers are fueling a rising crime throughout the country. The death toll has been an astronomical amount. That is the excuse that you use. Right? But regardless of the fact that the acts of the choppers may be fueling violent crime throughout the country, no one is saying that justice should not be brought forth. No one is saying that. Me personally, with the exception of the violence, I have no problem with the choppers chopping in foreign countries. No problem whatsoever. Because the fraud and deceit that they may perpetuate on the local level, that is what government and the rich perpetrate from above. And I don't hear no condemnation from government of this fraud and deceit from above that's been perpetrated on the people. Until you condemn those that perpetrate the same fraud and deceit from above, I will never ever condemn fraud and deceit from below. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. What is good for the rich is good for the poor. None of us sanction violence. Well, let me explain something. When the rich and opulent exploit this country, it is the suffering poor that feels it. The suffering poor that feels it. But as soon as a poor man chops something from those who have robbed us in century, then all of a sudden you want to create a hysterical about that. Well, I tell you what, we don't care about that. Me personally don't care about that. Chopper can chop from now till the sun burn out. Them chopper foreign, I don't care about that. Chopping from the poor man, we don't need that. Because every single day, look at the other day, a couple months ago I was in prison and I was reading the newspaper about the salary increase of the government in Jamaica. You think that's not chopping? The whole round in the parliament are chopper. And don't chop with no respect. Go learn how to chop a foreign. Go learn how to chop a foreign. Not chop the Jamaican people taxes money. But no quick to find out people like get up. Him a chopper. Him not do nothing progressive. Him not do this. Him not do that. Then you turn around and chop up the man who hold 2 foot on him and them. And go on yourself millions of dollars a raise. But you don't show yourself as chopper. But I tell you one thing. Jamaica have a history like someone in his story refers to. Jamaica is like a boiling pot, you know. It just simmer, but it never boil over. It never. Why Jamaica always simmer as a pot, but never boil over? And you know something when we learn with my Jamaican people, we want changes, but we don't really want it to boil over either. And that is the conundrum in which we have found ourselves. We want changes without the pot boil over. And it would be good if we can get fundamental changes to this country without the pot boiling over. We say if the pot have to boil over if we get the fundamental changes in this country, then so be it, the pot boil over. The pot boil over. What we really afraid of? We're afraid of the destruction of Jamaica like we are happening in Haiti. That is what we're afraid of. And I reason with a high level brethren from Haiti. Very high level, he was government minister, and we're referencing his name right now. His father one time was the head of the Haitian military. And when he explained to me why Haiti isn't at the position where it's there, and he even went as far as saying, and it don't necessarily mean that I agree with it, but he went as far as to say, he rather see the destruction of Haiti than foreigners controlling his country. Don't let the Jamaican people reach that point where we rather see that destruction and suffering upon our people than to see foreigners control this country. Do not let the Jamaican people reach that stage. Because I tell you one thing, I don't think it can happen, you know. That's why government act the way they act. Them believe it cannot happen. Them believe it cannot happen. But like I want, it can happen. It can happen. So until next time, this is Revolutionary Radio and this is Gillie Priest. Thank you very much.